Welcome to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Andrew Bartolotta. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making an impact, empowering the good in our community and around the globe. And did you know that over half of children in the United States have a physical or mental health issue? Today, we're learning more about the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health and talking with a mental health trailblazer who is changing the way we view and treat children's mental health by teaching how to calm the brain in order to have a happy family. Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge, thank you for joining us today.
Well, I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm so grateful for this conversation because we're in a time where, kids and families are struggling, and I like to give people resources that they can start using today to reduce stress and stop this suffering that everyone seems to be struggling with.
I totally agree. As a father of three little ones, I know how important this conversation is today. Now, before we dive into the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health, give listeners a glimpse at your background and expertise.
Yeah, well, I've had the privilege of helping thousands of families over 3 decades. And it really was my calling. And I was sort of guided to do mental health, but really to work with kids. And I love working with kids and families. Kids don't know that when they're struggling with something, they don't know they can't get better. And so when you give them the tools and the resources and you calm their brain down and then you teach them, lots of beautiful, magical things happen. And, I work with very complex cases most days, and I work with people all over the world. So people come to my Ridgefield, Connecticut center just out of New York, but I also work virtually with people, only virtually. And, I am supporting people one-on-one, but I also have books, I have programs, I have things, and I'm really working on a message of, hope for healing, but really practical mental health. I think we're making mental health way more complex than it should be. And when we teach people to calm that brain, and there's lots of ways we can do it, every family, there's free ways, there's ways that we can use technology, across the spectrum, we calm the brain down, behavior change, thinking changes, our attention changes, and it just becomes a lot easier to parent kids. And so that's really become my mission, is to really help educate people and then show them exactly what they can do to create these calm brains and happy families.
Well, I love that too, because you mentioned, when kids are struggling, they seem to act out, and there may be some behavioral issues when they're really struggling internally. They're showing it externally because they don't know how to manage that. And so, what would you say are kids in the U.S. struggling with today, and why?
Yeah. Well, first of all, behavior is the language of kids. So, and the other thing I want to say really quickly behind that is kids don't do things on purpose, right? It's their subconscious driving their behaviors. Let me say that again. Kids don't do things on purpose. As annoyed as you get at your kid and frustrated with your kid, a lot of behavior is normal too. Like, there's developmental things. We got to give our kids a little slack, right? I'm going to start doing a series about like growing up in the 80s and then growing up in now and what it was like and the differences. And I think people who are listening can relate. But kids today, I think more than anything, are struggling with stress. Stress is all around us. There's social stress, there's the technology stress, there's the stress that's at home because parents, we know through research, American Psychological Association does a Stress in America survey every year. 70% of parents are reporting high levels of stress. Okay, that's pretty significant. It's going to affect our kids. It's something called co-regulation. When we're stressed, it affects our kids. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. It's an opportunity to take care of yourself, right? I want to give you that, right? Because we don't take care of ourselves as parents. But when we realize how much it affects our kids, we're seeing a lot of kids with focus problems. We're seeing a lot of kids with poor stress tolerance, which means they lack coping skills and problem solving abilities. We're moving towards kids who don't know how to be uncomfortable and then find a solution, right? We want our kids to be good thinkers, good problem solvers, good decision makers when we're not around. And that's a learning experience through being autonomous. And depending on where you live in the country, Some kids are very much bubble wrapped, and they're not given an opportunity to make mistakes and learn from them. And that's a big, big reason why kids today don't have tolerance for uncomfortable thoughts and sensations.
That's deep, and I think that is a great conversation starter as a family that can really look at their children and go, okay, what stress is in our home and in our community that may be taking part in our children's lives. And you talked about stress. Another word we see a lot in our home, and even between my wife and I, we use this word a lot, is anxiety. What is the difference between stress and anxiety, and what are the signs parents should look for in children?
We don't really think our kids could have a clinical issue, especially young kids, right? But the average age of onset of an anxiety disorder is age 6.
Wow.
So kids are really, it's their nervous system revving up. And please know, you don't have to have a horrible event. You can be living in a beautiful home, sending your kid to the best schools, great food, and your kid's nervous system can be more easily disrupted. So when you start thinking about it like that, we start to understand like, oh, it's okay to get help. It's okay to treat it. So stress is a normal response to something that happened. Okay. So like, your mailbox got run over and you're like, what? It's got run over. And then you're like, okay, it's a mailbox. Fine. Anxiety is a clinical issue. And what I see is when compounded stressors build and the nervous system gets activated and it becomes in what we call sympathetic dominant. So that's the stress state. And at the highest levels, you're in fight, flight, or freeze, which means you're activated all the time. And again, with compounded daily stressors, it can easily happen. You're in a terrible job as an adult, or you're in school and you have a learning disability or attention deficit and you're struggling. It's very stressful, right? Somebody's like, you need to do this, you have to do that, you're behind in that. And so it's when you're clinically displaying those symptoms that relate to anxiety. So how does anxiety manifest itself in kids? Anxiety in kids will way more likely to be what we call somatic. So you're more likely to have sleep problems and gastrointestinal, which is the number one symptom of anxiety across all ages, by the way. It doesn't mean if you don't have it that you don't have anxiety, but you're going to see you might have head pain. You might have on one side, you might have an internalizer who is more tearful and easily worried and inside. And the other side, you might have an externalizer who's angry and frustrated. These can be signs of anxiety. Those are things you want to look for. So, and you want to look for changes. Anxiety tends to creep up. It's not often like a light switch, like, oh, I just got a bullies on my bus. Yes, that's easy. Okay, we see it real clear. But a lot of times it's those things that build up, and the physical signs can be your red flags, and you don't want to ignore them.
Now, Forbes has called you a thought leader in children's mental health. I totally agree. And you wrote the book, It's Gonna Be Okay, as a guide for parents to improve their child's mental health. How can this resource help kids and their families?
Why I wrote this book is I wanted to give people not just the tools, I wanted to give them the research, right? So I have over 40 pages of research citations for them to understand there are science-backed holistic solutions. And I want them to take a bird's eye view. I want them to pull back, get out of the micro, look at all the issues that are going on and find where they need to start. Because a lot of times when people are overwhelmed, they just don't know where to start. And really you have to start on that micro level, but you have to look at the things as a whole. There might be a lot of symptoms. And so in my book, I go through what are the most common things within the body, within the brain that break down: nutrition, epigenetics, diet, exercise, nutrient deficiencies. And these are things that are actionable that parents can change, and they can start with one thing, they can start with 5 things, wherever they are. Some people like to jump in the deep end of the pool, and some people like to go down the steps, and that's okay. But it gives you the science and the research to better understand what might be happening with your kid. And just to know that, again, like as you start in this conversation, 54.2% of the US population, 11-year-old research says, this pre-pandemic research says somebody's got a physical or mental health problem. So don't ignore it. Nobody regrets getting help. They only regret when they don't. And I think that is every day I'm always trying to make a mom or a dad feel okay because they're so regretful. Don't do that to yourself. Just give your kid and your family the TLC and the help. Make the investment in mental health. That's really important. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs listen, and I talk about generational mental wealth, right? We're always thinking about leaving our kids money, right? But if you don't feel good about yourself, and you don't love yourself, right? I work with extremely high net worth individuals, and the best of the best, even when their kids are struggling, they've done a lot of inner work. They make sure their brains and bodies and their self-care, that they're really doing that work. That is so important. And that's the gift that you want to leave your kids, because that stress inoculates them, that attracts the right people. You want your kids to marry the right partners. And it really changes things at a cellular level. It creates that mental and physical health. It's really important.
What is that first step to work with you or another professional in making sure that they are getting actionable help for their child?
You want to find a provider that's aligned with your family values, right? I think that's so important, right? If you're working with a provider that doesn't really fit, right? Like a lot of times I have people who, try psychiatric medication, even though they're against it. And my policy on psychiatric medication with kids is it never should be the first line of defense. It's a developing brain. There's lots of research about it. You can get on my website and look at the blogs. It's never a good idea. And a lot of times things can be addressed way more quickly with some tweaks in parenting and diet and whatever. So you want to find somebody. How do you do that, right? You ask a trusted friend, you ask somebody you respect, and you do your due diligence. You meet with them. Does this make sense? What is their process, right? Like I have a trademarked program, and what I'm doing is I've only pulled what science has showed us actually works, and I put it together in the right order at the right time. But I'm not a fit for everybody, and people have to actually apply to work with me. We work with just a tiny amount of people every month because you got to show up. You got to actually make micro changes. Me calming the brain is the easy part. It's those daily tweaks in your life that can be harder. And it's just like anything else when you decide you want to lose 20 pounds, right? It's the same thing with mental health. That's not to say you're a bad parent, but as a mom of 2 kids, your kids show up as fully formed individuals. We're here to just sort of corral them a little bit. And isn't it so funny how your kids, you have 3 kids, your twins are probably totally different.
Oh yeah. I mean, and the other day I'm looking at them and they're, acting up and being silly, and you go, okay, they're hilarious children. And then you realize you're responsible for them. And then the anxiety comes over me going, oh my gosh, okay, maybe they shouldn't yell certain words or jump super high off of a couch and land on their feet.
We just got a crash pad, Andrew. Look up crash pad. And we just threw that. We let the kids jump on that.
Yes. We've got those nuggets and they love climbing on it. And I love this conversation because it's so eye-opening for so many parents. And even like you said, entrepreneurs, maybe you don't have children and there's still information in this conversation that is worthy of you knowing and understanding and sharing with others. You have a fantastic list of resources on your website. One of them is coping statements with over 100 ways to help us learn how to manage stress. What are some other resources you have on your website, and where can people go to learn more and see them?
Well, my website is drroseann.com, drroseann.com. I have lots of blogs. I have lots of free resources, and people can follow me on TikTok and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. I'm on all of those Dr. Roseann except Facebook is Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge. And, you know, I give practical information, education about what things are, but also what to do about it, right? So it's like that treadmill, right? And whether this is for yourself, the treadmill only works when you use it. If you're using it as a place to hang your clothes, you're not going to actually develop muscle. And in entrepreneurs, and I'm a second generation entrepreneur of a very successful entrepreneur, and I'm a very successful entrepreneur, you have to carve out time with your mental health. Just like brushing your teeth, you need to take at least 10 minutes a day to regulate your nervous system. And you are going to be so glad you did. We never want to slow down, entrepreneurs, but powering down is how we power up our brain. And so as little as 10 minutes, the research shows us, of breath work or meditation or yoga or things like I do, like neurofeedback, biofeedback, PMF, really has a positive effect on the brain. So that's where I would encourage people to start wherever they are, whether it's for themselves or their kids, or they're doing it together.
Dr. Roseann, we could talk all day. I love what you're doing. Thank you for being a beacon of hope for so many children and entrepreneurs and just people in general to make mental health a priority. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.